This notion, however, I was forced to abandon, for such being the case, the brig must have frequently gone about, and I was entirely satisfied for her continual inclination to the larboard that she had been sailing all along with a steady breeze on her starboard quarter. Besides, granting that we were still in the neighborhood of the island, why should not Augustus have visited me and informed me of the circumstance? Pondering in this manner upon the difficulties of my solitary and cheerless condition, I resolved to wait yet another 24 hours when, if no relief were obtained, I would make my way to the trap and endeavor either to hold a parley with my friend or at least get a little fresh air through the opening and a further supply of water from the stateroom. While occupied with this thought, however, I fell in spite of every exertion to the contrary, into a state of profound sleep. Or rather, stupor. My dreams were of the most terrific description. Every species of calamity and horror befell me. Among other miseries, I was smothered to death between huge pillows by demons of the most ghastly and ferocious aspect. Immense serpents held me in their embrace and looked earnestly in my face with their fearfully shining eyes. Then deserts, limitless, of the most forlorn and awe-inspiring character, spread themselves out before me, immensely tall trunks of trees. Gray and leafless, rose up in an endless succession as far as the eye could reach. Their roots were concealed in wide-spreading morasses, whose dreary water lay intensely black, still and altogether beneath. And the dreary water lay intensely. And the strange trees seemed endowed with a human vitality, and waving to and fro with their skeleton arms, were crying to the silent waters for mercy, in the shrill and piercing accents of the most acute agony and despair. The scene changed, and I stood naked and alone amid the burning sandplains of Sahara. At my feet lay crouched a fierce lion of the tropics. Suddenly his wide eyes opened and fell upon me. With a convulsive bound, he sprang to his feet and laid bare his horrible teeth. In another instant, there burst from his red throat a roar like the thunder of a firmament, and I fell impetuously to the earth. Stifling in another paroxysm of terror, I at last found myself partially awake. My dream then was not at all a dream. Now at least, I was in possession of my senses. The paws of some huge and real monster were pressing heavily upon my bosom. His hot breath was in my ear, and his white and ghastly fangs were gleaming upon me through the gloom. Had 1,000 lives hung upon the movement of a limb or of the utterance of a syllable, I could never have stirred nor spoken. The beast, whatever it was, retained his position without attempting any immediate violence, while I lay in utterly helpless and, I fancied, a dying condition beneath him. I felt that my powers of body and mind were fast leaving me. In a word, that I was perishing, and perishing of sheer fright. My brain swam, and I grew deadly sick. My vision failed. Even the glaring eyes above me grew dim. Making a last strong effort, I at length breathed a faint ejaculation to God and resigned myself to die. The sound of my voice seemed to arouse all the latent fury of the animal. He precipitated himself at full length upon my body, And what was my astonishment then when, with a long and low whine, he commenced licking my face and my hands with the greatest eagerness and with the most extravagant demonstration of affection and joy. I was bewildered, utterly lost in amazement, but I could not forget the peculiar whine of my Newfoundland dog, Tiger, and the odd manner of his caresses I well knew. It was he. I experienced a sudden rush of blood to my temples, a giddy and overpowering sense of deliverance and reanimation. I rose hurriedly from the mattress upon which I had been lying, and throwing myself upon the neck of my faithful follower and friend, relieved the long oppression in my bosom in a flood of the most passionate tears. As upon a former occasion, my conceptions were in a state of the greatest indistinctness and confusion after leaving the mattress. For a long time, I found it nearly impossible to connect any ideas, but by very slow degrees, my thinking faculties returned, and I again called to memory the several incidents of my condition. For the presence of Tiger, I tried in vain to account, and after busying myself with 1,000 different conjectures respecting him, was forced to content myself with rejoicing that he was with me to share my dreary solitude and render me comfort by his caresses. Most people love their dogs, but Tiger and for Tiger I had an affection far more ardent than common, and never certainly did any creature more truly deserve it. For 7 years he had been my inseparable companion, and in a multitude of instances had given evidence of the noble qualities for which we value the animal. I rescued him, when a puppy, from the clutches of a malignant little villain in Nantucket, who was leading him with a rope around his neck to the water. And the grown dog repaid their obligation about 3 years afterward by saving me from the bludgeon of our street robber. Getting now the hold of the watch, I found, upon applying it to my ear, that it had run down. But at this I was not at all surprised, being convinced, for the peculiar state of my feelings, that I had slept, as before, for a very long period of time. How long, it was of course impossible to say. I was burning up with fever, and my thirst was almost intolerable. I felt about a box for my little remaining supply of water, for I had no light. The taper having burnt to the socket of the lantern, and this phosphorus box not coming readily to hand. Upon finding the jug, however, I discovered it to be empty. Tiger, no doubt, having been tempted to drink it, as well as devour the remnant of mutton, the bone of which I lay well picked by the opening of the box. The spoiled meat I could well spare, but my heart sank at the thought of the water. I felt feeble in the extreme, so much that I shook all over as with an ague at the slightest movement or exertion. To add to my troubles, the brig was pitching and rolling with great violence, and the oil casks which lay upon my box were in momentary danger of falling down, so as to block up the only way of ingress or egress. I thought also terrible sufferings from seasickness. These considerations determined me to make my way at all hazards to the trap and obtain immediately relief, before I could be incapacitated from doing so altogether. Having come to this resolve, I again felt for the phosphorus box and tapers. Former I found after some little trouble, but not discovering the tapers as soon as I had expected, for I remembered very nearly the spot in which I had placed them. I gave up the search for the present, and bidding Tiger lie quiet, began at once my journey toward the trap. In this attempt, my great feebleness became more than ever apparent. It was with the utmost difficulty I could crawl along at all, and very frequently my limbs sank suddenly from beneath me, when, falling prostrate on my face, I would remain for some minutes in a state bordering on insensibility. Still, I struggled forward by slow degrees, dreading every moment I should swoon amid the narrowing, intricate windings of the lumber. In which event I had nothing but death to expect as a result. At length, upon making a push forward with all the energy I could command, I struck my forehead violently against the sharp corners of the iron-bound crate. The accident only stunned me for a few moments, but I found, to my inaccessible grief, the quick and the violent roll of the vessel had thrown the crate entirely across my path, so as effectually to block up the passage. With my utmost exertions, I could not move it a single inch from its position, it being closely wedged in among the surrounding boxes and ship furniture. It became necessary, therefore, enfeebled as I was, either to leave the guidance of the whipcord and seek out a new passage, or to climb over the obstacle and resume the path on the other side. The former alternative presented too many difficulties and dangers to be thought of without a shudder. In my present weak state of both body and mind, I should infallibly lose my way if I attempted it, and perish miserably in the dismal and disgusting labyrinths of the hold. I proceeded, therefore, without hesitation to summon up all my remaining strength and fortitude, and endeavor, as best I might, to clamber over the crate. Upon standing erect with this end in view, I found the undertaking even a more serious task than all my fears could lead me to imagine. On each side of the narrow passage arose a complete wall of various heavy lumber, which the least blunder on my part might be the means of bringing down upon my head, or, if this accident did not occur, the path might be effectually blocked up against my return by the descending mass, as it was in front of by the obstacle there. The crate itself was a very long and unwieldy box, upon which no foothold could be attained. In vain I attempted by every means in my power to reach the top, with the hope of being thus enabled to draw myself up. Had I succeeded in reaching it, it is certain that my strength would have proved utterly inadequate to the task of getting over, and it was better in every respect that I failed. At length, in a desperate effort to force the crate from its ground, I felt a strong vibration in the side next to me. I thrust my hand eagerly to the side of the planks and found that my very large one was loose. With my pocket knife, which luckily I had with me, I succeeded after great labor in prying it entirely off, and getting through the aperture to discover to my exceeding joy that there were no boards on the opposite side. In other words, the top was wanting, it being bottom through which I forced my way. I now met with important difficulty in proceeding along the line until I finally reached the nail. With a beating heart, I stood erect, and with a gentle touch pressed against the cover of the trap. It did not rise as soon as I had expected it. I expressed it with somewhat more determination, still dreading lest some other person than Augustus might be in the stateroom. The door, however, to my astonishment, remained steady, and I became somewhat uneasy, for I knew that it had formerly required little but no effort to remove it. I pushed it away strongly, and was nevertheless firm. For with all my strength, it still did not give way. With rage, with fury, with despair, it set all at defiance my utmost efforts, and it was evident from the unyielding nature of the resistance that the hull had either been discovered and effectually nailed up, or that some immense weight had been placed upon it, which was useless to think of removing. My sensations were those of extreme horror and dismay. In vain I attempted to reach on the probable cause of my being thus entombed. I could summon up no connected chain of reflection, and sinking to the floor, gave way unresistingly to the most gloomy imaginings, in which the dreadful deaths of thirst, famine, and suffocation, and premature interment crowded upon me as the prominent disasters to be encountered. At length there returned to me some portion of presence of mind. I arose and felt with my fingers for the seams of the cracks of the aperture. Having found them, I examined them closely to ascertain if they emitted any light from the stateroom, but none was visible.